Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So, Cindy, without Mr. Voorhees being here, it looks like we have everyone present.
Correct.
Okay. Are you ready to start?
I am.
Pull these out. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the City of Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment meeting for October 15th. Looks like someone's muted. I was going to ask to mute. If the meeting is disconnected at any time, the meeting will be stopped and reconvened once the connection can be restored. If the connection is not able to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued to the next regularly scheduled Board of Adjustment meeting. The meeting and agenda and the documents are located at okc.gov. For anyone wishing to speak on an agenda item or speak under citizens to be heard, hopefully you've already reached out to staff by phone or email, and we will call on you at the appropriate time. We will call a case, and then we will recognize the applicant to speak or the applicant's representative. Then we will recognize any protests, and then we'll close with the applicant speaking. The board will deliberate and ask questions at any time, and then the board will vote. If you have not prearranged to speak with city staff, I will regularly ask if anyone else would like to be heard on a matter. At that time, if you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. On your computer, click raise hand. You should be able to lower your hand using that same function. On your phone, press *9. The board and staff will be notified if you raise your hand. And just to note, if you've already signed up to speak on a matter, you won't need to use that raise your hand function. We should recognize you on our prearranged speakers list. These instructions, if you forget, are also available on the agenda if needed. For speakers other than the applicant, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you call in after your item is heard, or if you have a different matter to raise with the board, you'll be allowed to speak under citizens to be heard at the end of the meeting. When you call in, staff will mute your phone. I ask that all participants, except for board members, keep their sound on mute until you're recognized to speak. To unmute your phone, press *6. Board members will be allowed to speak and ask questions and make comments at any time. Please make an effort not to interrupt board members while they're speaking, because we need to have a clear record and only one person can be heard at a time on the system. Before you begin speaking, please introduce yourself by stating your name and address. And the meeting is now called to order. Cindy, can you take the roll, please?
Mr. Merchant.
Present.
Ms. Kitty Asbury.
Present.
Mike Privet.
Present.
Monica Ybarra.
Present.
And we have Mike Voorhees is absent.
Okay. The first item on the agenda is to receive the minutes from the October 1st, 2020 meeting. Do we have any changes, or are we ready to take a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from our last meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the October 1st, 2020 meeting. Once you're able to, on PrimeGov, cast your votes, please. And the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is continuance requests or withdrawals, and I believe we have some.
I have 3 continuance requests. Item 5, 14-741, defer to November 5th. Item 6, 14-729 to January 21. Item 7, 14-780 to January 21. And we have 1 new continuance that's not on your printed agenda. It's item 4, case 14-788 to November 5th.
I think we have Mr. Box available to speak on at least some of those. Mr. Box, if you're on the line, you could speak to those, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll start with item 5. So item 5 was an HP appeal, and one of the reasons it was denied was there was a bit of protest in the neighborhood. As of this morning at 10 a.m., we have come to an agreement with the neighbors that were in protest. In an effort to reduce the agreement to writing, we are requesting that this item be continued to the November 5th Board of Adjustment hearing. There is a November 4th HP hearing that this item will also be on. So with any luck, that will be approved by the HP Commission on the 4th, and I can submit a letter by the end of that day withdrawing said appeal, and it will be gone from your docket.
Will that be a new application? That's item 4, correct?
Yes, sir. Item 4.
Yeah, and would that be a new application at HP, I assume?
Well, so this one was already filed, but he filed a second application that was already working its way through in the event that something happened here. So it's identical and is now being revised pursuant to the agreement reached this morning. So presumably we'll be able to withdraw the appeal. If not, we have the appeal ready to go on the next day.
Okay, makes sense.
On item 5 and 6, those are both ones that have been continued multiple times. I understand that there is a level of frustration with the board seeing multiple continuances. All I would say is, we kind of beg for your mercy. These are clients that have spent a lot of money to get to this point, and they want the opportunity to be able to present their cases in person. I am told by the city that we will be in person beginning November. So item 6 is asked to be continued to the next January. That will ensure that we are in person. And item 5, I'd ask to revise my continuance request to December the 3rd rather than November the 5th. I do not believe November 5th we will be in person. I believe it will be the second meeting in November, but to ensure that there's not some glitch at the second meeting, December the 3rd gets us where we need to be, and I will commit to you that there won't be a need for any additional continuances.
Okay. I was a bit concerned with the kind of request to have an in-person meeting, because I didn't know when we were going to be in person. Numbers are higher than they ever have been as far as COVID goes. And so, I figured we might go through the fall remote, but I got the same notice that you did after I requested some more information that the intention now is to return to in-person meetings. And so that concern for me is alleviated as far as, when we would go back to in-person or not. If the circumstances change, though, and my understanding is the state legislature needs to act in order to continue these remote meetings. So if that happens, do you know what your client's position is on that? I mean, at some point, if we're not going to go back to in-person, they're just going to have to presumably accept a remote meeting.
At that, I'm willing to commit that this will be, short of some unforeseen complication, this will be the last time we request it. My belief is that we'll be back in person. But to your point, at some point, if this is the way that my practice is going to be, then so be it. And I'll have to figure out a way to be crafty with exhibits and other visual aids to assist the board in their inquiry.
Okay. Before we vote, was there anyone on the line that wanted to speak against a continuance on any of these applications? Don't see any hands raised. Board members, any questions or comments?
Looking forward to seeing David's poster boards again.
It's going to be amazing.
On his easel.
You're going to love it.
So with the modification to case number 14741 to be heard, was it the December 5th meeting? It's probably not the 5th.
December the 3rd is the first meeting in December for the board.
Okay. So with that modification, board members, do we have a motion to approve the requests as requested?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to continue items 4, 5, 6, and 7 as requested. Once you're able to, cast your votes, please. And those items are continued.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is a request by the public, which I don't think we have any. And that will move us to public hearings. There's nothing on the consent docket, so we'll move to items requiring a separate vote.
The first item is case 14-787. It's a request of 191 LLC for a variance to off-street parking requirements in the I-2 district located at 1900 Linwood Boulevard. And Jeff Sabin represents the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Sabin, if you wanted to introduce yourself by name and address and present your application.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Sabin. I work with the Center for Economic Development Law, 301 North Harvey Avenue, Suite 100, Oklahoma City. We represent 19L LLC, the applicant for this request. The applicant is requesting a variance from the off-street parking requirements imposed by Chapter 59, Section 101.50.1, and specifically the specific amount of parking required under the tables under Chapter 59, Section 10.600, for its proposed redevelopment of the existing warehouse located at 1900 Linwood Boulevard. If you could go to the site plan that was included with our materials. This is the shaded area is the general area that's being redeveloped for different uses. It consists of 3 different parts. The eastern portion of that existing warehouse building will be split into 2 different tenant spaces. One of approximately 5,000 square feet that's proposed for a microbrewery. The use unit classification under the city code is for light industrial. And the second part of that is an approximately 3,500 square foot office or retail use where no tenant has been selected yet. The other additional portion that's subject here is the outbuilding directly adjacent to the railroad tracks on the southwest corner of the site. And this is proposed to be a 2,400 square foot restaurant, the use unit classification being eating establishment. All of these proposed uses are permitted by right in the site's I-2 Modern Industrial Zoning District. When the applicant submitted his building permit to start work on these projects, one of the primary comments that he got back in response from the city was that there was insufficient off-street parking to support the new proposed uses. Based on our own calculation, the city did not provide a calculation, but based on our own calculation of the uses based on each project component, we believe that a total of 55 spaces are necessary. That would be 52 regular vehicle spaces plus 3 accessible spaces. But as you can see by looking at the site plan, there's also a separate parking plan and illustration included with the exhibits to the materials. The site really can only fit 18 off-street parking spaces, and we've provided 14 off-street motorcycle spaces as well. This is the crux of the applicant's hardship. Basically that the project cannot meet these off-street parking requirements without demolishing a substantial portion of the existing structures located on the site. The particular hardship is peculiar to this site. The site is just over 1.5 acres in size, but the building footprints on the site is close to a full acre. So really only 1/3 of the site by surface area is available for anything, let alone the parking requirements. Plus the building was originally constructed in the 1940s, long before the city's current parking requirements were established. When the site was originally developed, this area was served by streetcar and bus systems, and a lot of it was accessed just by walking from surrounding residential neighborhoods. If the Board of Adjustment were to grant the requested variance, there would not be any substantial detriment to the public good or any impairment of the parking requirements, or at least the purposes of the parking requirements, which are to ensure adequate parking, maneuvering, and loading facilities for each use. Our application notes that there is significant on-street parking available. If you go to the aerial illustration that was part of the exhibits, you can see there is existing on-street parking along Kentucky Avenue that's not in very good condition and doesn't meet the city's current design or size criteria. The applicant anticipates being able to work with the city to try to get 15 spaces approved that meet those modern criteria. There is also, based on the city's 22-foot spacing requirements for on-street parking available on Linwood Boulevard, there would be 14 potential spaces available. However, those are subject to a no parking ordinance between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. To make sure that traffic flowing into downtown during the morning commute isn't distributed or isn't affected. So in addition to those things, the amount of spaces required and the amount of spaces that are offered, both that could be provided on street and off street, the applicant believes are adequate number of spaces for the uses that are proposed. Reducing the parking requirement also falls squarely in line with many of the implementation policies outlined in Plan OKC. Things that reduce parking requirements and promote infill development kind of reflect more modern trends and best practices in urban planning and design. They help reduce auto dependence, promote better urban design, and just generally reflect the growing consensus in the planning world that landowners are more in tune with the adequate parking needs for their tenants than one-size-fits-all city formulas. Granting the variance would be the minimum action necessary to alleviate this hardship. And it will not, it will still maintain sufficient access for the public to the new proposed uses. And it will maintain sufficient access. The applicant, the manager of the applicant, Chip Fudge, is also available if the board has any questions of either of us.
I have a couple of questions. I understand the hardship, particularly with these brewery kind of development projects, where there are a lot of times in these large warehouses that, you know, parking wasn't really, you weren't required to have substantial parking whenever these were built, because they weren't intended to be used as kind of breweries, but now they are. And I think they're great projects and it gets some use out of these old buildings, but parking is always an issue. Something in your favor that you mentioned was, you know, the nature of breweries, I think, and the way that the future is going. People are going to be driving less and less and, you know, taking ride sharing or something like that, particularly if your client's beers are any good. You know, presumably they're going to be taking an Uber to and from. So, you know, I understand the hardship. My larger concern is an element that you have to meet, which is the minimum necessary to alleviate the hardship. And in particular, you know, if you're working with the city on getting some on-street parking, is there a way that we can wait that process out and potentially obviate the need for a variance at all? Or kind of give me your timeline on that.
So the applicant's engineer submitted their first plan for the on-street parking back in August, and they were waiting to submit their revised plan that was included with the materials pending the outcome of today's hearing. I believe there are some requirements in the code that would prevent the specific on-street parking from being dedicated specifically to these proposed uses, especially the parking along Linwood Boulevard, which is subject to that no parking ordinance between hours that it wouldn't affect anyway, but I think that would prevent those spaces from being specifically necessary or applied to our minimum parking requirements.
What about Kentucky?
Chip, are you available or online to answer specific questions about Well, Kentucky Avenue, we would anticipate within the next week submitting the revised plans with the Traffic Management Division to get that before the Transportation Commission and City Council for approval, hopefully by December or January at the latest.
Jeff, I am here if Sam, if you have any questions of me.
Okay. Did you have any specific follow-up? I have a couple more questions, but if you had specific follow-up, you can be recognized to speak.
I don't have, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I guess.
Okay. So that was my only concern. I mean, not to have any distrust or anything of the applicant, but one thing I did not want is for us to grant a variance and then you guys give up on the plan to get on-street parking because now you have the variance. And so I wanted to avoid that if possible. Presumably you're going to want on-street parking regardless of what happens out of this variance process, for the sake of your customers that are going to be and your patrons that are going to be there. But I just want to run down that issue.
There is no question that we want the on-street parking completed, and can you hear me?
Yes.
And there's no question we want the on-street parking completed. We have worked it into our budget and have paid a significant amount of money to have it re-engineered to be able to do that. To have the 14 to 18 spaces on the east side of the building are huge to us for the brewery and the rest of our customers. And I don't know how else except for to give you my word that I will continue to pursue that and I will make that happen. During this process.
So I'll kind of tell you where I'm coming from. On these requests and these applications, I like to deal with hard numbers. And so if we grant a variance, it's for a hard number of spaces. And my kind of back of the napkin calculation, which may or may not be accurate, but I'll throw some numbers at you. Using your numbers of 55 spaces that you're required to meet, you've got 14 motorcycle spaces, and the code allows you to, for every 2 motorcycle spaces, you get 1 parking space reduction. So that's 7 reduced right off the bat, putting you at, see, 18. Well, and then you're going to have 18. So right off the bat, your variance wouldn't be for 15. It would be 15 minus 18 because you have 18 spots in there. So that's 37. Minus 7 for the motorcycle parking puts you at 30. And then you've got a 25% allowance that you could have as a reduction for landscaping and bike racks. So that would get you down to 22.5, which will bump that up to 23 would be the variance on the application as it's drafted. So we'd be varying 23 spaces. What you've presented today shows that you have around 29 on-street parking spaces, which is more than enough to get you within the code to where you wouldn't need a variance if we continue the application till after you work those issues out with the city. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I'm concerned about what the timeline is to work those out with the city before I can start construction, or is there any way for those to run concurrently? I guess that was the initial thought of asking for the variance, is that we had the ability to start construction and move let the 120-day construction process run simultaneously while we're completing the parking requirements.
Okay. And that went to my first question of Mr. Saban, just understanding your timeline to know whether, if we continue this, would that put a hardship on you until you get the process worked out with the city? If it does, I'm confident moving forward today and discussing the merits of 23 space variance. But if it didn't, continuing it makes sense to me. And all that goes back to the major point. I prefer not to grant a variance if we don't absolutely have to. So that's kind of the overarching point I'm getting at here.
I believe that it does create a hardship, and my greatest concern is the brewery tenant that we have is ready to sign a lease, and we're afraid that we're going to lose them if we can't start construction virtually immediately. I got them to hold off and stay with us for another 30 to 45 days because we were asking for the variance. And, I've got $3 million in the building. We're getting ready to put another $1 million in it. And my fear is that we lose that tenant, and we're back to square one looking for a tenant for the brewery space, which is roughly half of the space. And the barbecue space is, could be operational within, fairly quickly. And I don't have any fear of losing that tenant, but the hardship of losing the main tenant, I think is real.
Okay. And then kind of the last question, based on those numbers that I proposed to you, is it possible to get that 25% reduction for bike racks and landscaping?
Bike racks, certainly. The challenge we have with landscaping, everything is covered in concrete with the exception of that north to south strip. And we have to eat into that north to south strip with 3 feet of concrete to make the parking up to code as today. So the answer is I'm happy to do that. My concern is without cutting holes in the concrete, I'm not sure I can do that.
Mr. Chairman, the variance would still be required regardless of the outcome of the on-street parking, because that parking can't be counted to meet his specific parking requirement. They have to, the parking spaces to meet the requirement must be on the subject property.
Okay, I thought I read abutting or something somewhere, but I was not clear on that, so I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, if your concern is that the parking on Kentucky doesn't go through, I know the board has in the past conditionally granted a variance. And I think a condition to make sure that goes through the appropriate city channels to get approval, I think would probably be acceptable. If it's not, this is the first time I'm talking with my client about it, but Chip, if that would be acceptable to you, let us know.
Jeff, that would certainly be acceptable.
Okay. Board members, any questions or comments?
So this is Kitty. Are we looking at a possibility of a variance of 23 parking spaces? Is that correct? Minimum?
Minimum.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it would sort of depend on what kind of reduction they could get for bike racks and landscaping. You might be able to get it all with bike racks. I don't have it pulled up right now, but yeah, I don't see any. I mean, you'd have to work with your configurations and make sure that it would work based on the clearance requirements, but you might be able to get it all done with bike racks. So I guess I'll defer to the applicant. Given those numbers I've thrown around, if I were you, I'd want probably a buffer if we were going to vote on this today. Mm-hmm. If not, the safest thing would be just to get a continuance or do the calculations yourselves to whether there's something that you're comfortable with. But if you're comfortable proceeding today, I'd probably recommend a buffer if I were you from my 23 and increase that a little bit. And then you tell me what you think you would need, and then the board can deliberate on that.
I certainly would like to ask for a buffer. I'd have to defer to my counsel to tell me what he thinks.
I would also prefer action today. And I guess my concern with trying to reduce or put a number on the variance number itself is that it was my understanding, and maybe Mr. Chambliss can speak to this, but that the total reductions allowed for motorcycle parking and bike racks is limited to 25% of the total parking requirements, which if the total parking requirements that we have calculated are correct, that would only allow us to reduce it by 13 spaces.
That sounds right.
So I think we would still be needing a variance what I guess what the difference is between the 18 that we have shown. And so 55 minus 13 is what, 38, 37? So 19 spaces.
55 minus 13 is 42.
Oh, I'm completely off. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So JJ, would we reduce from 55 the number of spaces they actually have, just 18, and then do our calculation, you think, of reductions?
Yeah, I think you take the actual car spaces they have, subtract that from 55, and that would be your variance, and let the motorcycle spaces maybe serve as the cushion, and also include a condition that the variance is subject to the approval of the parking on Kentucky by the Traffic and Transportation Commission.
What about the parking that they mentioned on Linwood? Would that be included also into that subjection?
It's existing, so they already have that, and it's not going anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
So I think to be generous, we'd be looking at around, well, let me delete that, but I mean, 37, and then is what you've got. And then you can take reductions. You've got 7 for the motorcycle parking already that would eat into your reductions. So, you know, I think you might be able to get a little bit more than that. So maybe the variance would be 30 spaces, and that gives you plenty of a buffer to work with several spaces on the condition that the on-street parking on Kentucky gets approved by the city.
I think that should work for our purposes.
Okay. Board members, with that number in mind, any questions or comments? Yeah, I mean, I can support that just given the use. It makes sense to me. I think a lot of the breweries in the area are like that. As frustrating as it is to be a patron, you know, that's kind of how it is. I think it's the norm. So, and I think ride sharing is going to get more and more popular. So,
And our ordinance kind of pushes them that way too. So,
mm-hmm. Okay. I don't have anyone else signed up to speak on this matter. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak on this matter that hasn't spoken already? Okay, hearing none. If anyone wanted to make a motion.
I would move that we approve the request in case 14787 with the condition that the Kentucky Street parking is approved by the city. And for the total number of spaces of 30, let me pull up my calculator, 30 spaces.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case number 14787 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance limited to not in excess of 30 parking spaces for the variance, and on the condition that the Kentucky, I think it's an avenue, but that on-street parking gets approved by the city. Once you're able to, cast your votes, please. And it's approved.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck with the project.
Thank you. Come by and have a beer when we get it done.
I almost added as a condition we each get a tab, not less than $100, but I left that one out.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that would be an appropriate.
I'd let our municipal counselors sort out the legality of that. But
Thank you all very much.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, moving on. Item 2, case 14789 is a request of Catherine Ryan for a variance to the accessory building regulations, that being the location and the roof pitch in the R1 district located at 4932 Northwest 34th Street.
Great. Is Ms. Ryan on the line or a representative?
I'm here.
Okay. If you wanted to introduce yourself and present your application.
I think Cindy Lakin has that. My name's Catherine Ryan, and I live at 4932 Northwest 34th Street. And we are requesting a garden shed / storage, mostly for tools, on the east side of our property. And I think she has everything up in front of you there.
All right. Looks like this was a pretty uniquely configured property, but if you just wanted to talk a little bit about why it needs to be in that location.
It's really the only spot that we have a space for. We have a lot of very large old trees in this area, and to put it anywhere else would require the removal of a lot of those trees, and we don't really want to do that. You know, they've been here for many, many years, far longer than I have, and I'd hate to see them go. And this would be a great convenience to have this in that spot because it's relatively close to the house and I can get back and forth, you know, easily.
I think you had this was one where we had a letter of support. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Is this structure going to house any living quarters?
No.
Okay.
I'm just trying to find the aerial. There it is. I guess there's not a variance request for the setback requirement or anything.
No, the setback is met.
Okay. Looking at some of these adjacent properties, but it looks that's not going to be an issue. So okay. And then the roof pitch, if you wanted to just discuss the roof pitch. Ms. Ryan?
I'm not sure I can speak as well to that as my representatives can. I guess we had to change it because it wasn't, the original plan was not up to, I don't know whether you'd say ordinance or code or what, but so they changed it actually to bring it into compliance. So I'm not sure that that's an issue now.
They've actually redesigned the structure to meet the requirements of the roof pitch. So we don't need a variance for that anymore. It's just about the location.
Okay, good.
They meet the roof pitch of 412, but it's required to be a hip or gable roof. And this is I'd call it a shed roof. So they do need a variance for the type of roof, but they have redesigned it to meet that 412 pitch.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Board members, any questions or comments?
No, seems like a neat little building.
It is.
Yeah, I think it's a peculiar piece of property, kind of being on the end of that cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
Unique configuration.
It's
So
also, if I might just add one more thing, this is Mrs. Ryan's daughter. It's also worth mentioning that there's an existing shed in that exact location right now, and it's actually sitting in the side setback. So they would be correcting that and pulling it out of the side setback.
That's right. That's right. Which I know I appreciated that. It seemed like you were getting a little bit, but also giving a little bit. So,
Yeah.
so that was good. I assume this one's going to be a little bit bigger than the existing structure.
That's
A
correct.
little bit, yes.
Well, I mean, I can support this one. I don't know about the rest of the board, but I was okay with this one. I don't have anyone else sign up to speak on this matter. Was there anyone else on the line that wanted to speak on this matter? Great. Board members, questions, comments, or a motion?
Yes, this is Kitty. I would like to make a motion that we accept case number 14789 for the reasons that it meets the requirements of the variance requested.
I'll second. Oh, sorry. I was waiting on my.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance requests in case number 14789 for the reason that they meet the statutory conditions for variances. Once you're able to on PrimeGov, cast your votes, please. And the variances are approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item 3 is case 14790. It's a request of Western Farmers Electric Co-op for a variance to the minimum lot size requirement of the AA district located at 9007 South Check Hall Road. And Thomas Orondo represents the applicant.
Okay, is the representative on the line?
How about now?
We can hear you.
All right. Well, I do represent Western Farmers Electric, and this is a new one for me, buying a substation within city limits of Oklahoma City. But as you can see, or maybe not see completely, the south side of this property abuts an existing oil and gas well. The east side would be Check Hall Road. The north would be 89th. And then the west would be a Stillwater Central Railroad. And so we were kind of in search of that property for its acreage, I guess. Not knowing, kind of going into this a little bit blind on not knowing that we needed to have a 5-acre minimum. It's not of any use as far as Western Farmers is concerned to extend the property west as you would through that little triangle. And I don't believe that it would still add up to the 5-acre minimum. So that's where we were whenever I was going through all of this and trying to figure out everything that we needed to do. Our, I guess, side of it is, even if we expanded to finish out the triangle, I don't believe that we would have the 5-acre minimum. And we were hoping to move forward with the just over 3 acres.
Okay. I think being a public utility helps your cause a little bit. Board members, any questions or comments?
I'm just kind of curious what the intent of the 5-acre minimum is by the city.
It's really for the development of residential, where you have larger acreages, where you don't have water and sewer service, and to keep the density consistent with other large acre parcels in the area. But this won't be developed as a residential property. It will just be a substation. I think here that it's the use that's the unique thing.
I don't know if it helps or makes any difference. coming out of the west side of that substation, there will be an electric transmission line, and it will go to the east boundary of the railroad right-of-way and follow that to a point just west, approximately to the half-mile line, and then go south. So as far as, if there were any development west of that substation, ultimately there's a electric transmission line, easement and line that will be there. So that kind of, cuts out the, I guess.
Yeah, I personally am more critical when these are residential, but given this use, I don't have a problem with this.
Yeah.
So, board members, any other questions or comments? Okay, I don't have anyone else to sign up to speak on this, but anyone else that's on the line, were they hoping to speak on this matter? We'll wait a few seconds. If not, I think we're ready for a motion.
This is Kitty. I'd like to make a motion that we accept case number 14790 for the variance requested based upon the fact that it is not going to be a residential area.
And I'll second.
This is Rita Talley. Does it also meet the statutory requirements?
Thank you. And because it meets the statutory requirements of a variance. Thank you.
A little bit of cover in case we end up in litigation.
Thank you.
Got a motion and a second to approve the variance in case number 14790 for the reason that it meets statutory conditions for a variance and is not going to be developed as a residential. Cast your votes, please. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next items on the agenda were all continued. The next item after that's additional items, nothing on the agenda there. Communications and board reports. We'll pause for a second here. Is there anyone that wanted to propose or present communications or board reports? I guess if city staff, anyone knows the updates or wanted to give a brief update just so the board's aware and anyone listening is aware of the kind of COVID updates. I guess we're anticipating going back to in-person meetings in December. Is that correct?
That would be our first in-person meeting, would be the first meeting in December.
Okay.
And the council chambers is being renovated or modified right now to kind of trying to accommodate that and provide for social distancing.
So, Rita, is there any discretion that the various boards have on that issue?
Not at this point. Right now, it's the directive of the council. And as a matter of fact, a memo went out today. This is the second one that says that the meetings will resume. It's consistent with the order of the governor, which will be expiring soon. And so to comply with the Open Meeting Act, we have to meet in person. The only way that that would change would be if the governor signed another order allowing the meetings the way we're having them right now.
Yeah, that's...
So it's a variance from state law that allows meetings by teleconference, and we won't have that. So we'll be back to the regular statute.
Yeah, that was my... I hadn't looked into it, but that's what my interpretation was.
That's correct.
We were kind of powerless to do anything about that. I don't know if the city or the council has any power to do anything or put any leverage, but it seems to me like it would be appropriate.
Just to make a request of the governor is all.
Right,
because
right.
of course the state law. So
Or at least give deference to different municipalities or different boards. I mean, if you got a board full of high risk people and then a board full of 20-year-olds, they might make a different, decision on that, exercising that discretion. So I guess we'll comply for now and play it by ear. But those are my immediate thoughts. I would like a little bit more discretion on that. And I don't know how the board feels about that. I don't think we really have any power to do anything, but if the board has any comments or anything on that.
I do want to ask a question. So is it just the governor that makes that decision, or is that the attorney general's office? Because
The legislature.
the legislature, okay.
yes, the legislature, and then the governor weighed in. The governor signs things, but the legislature made the decision.
Okay.
And I suppose they could be persuaded to do something extending it. But right now, there is a date. I think it's November 15th.
It is.
So even outside of legislative action at the state level, would a governor's declaration of a state of emergency or anything, I mean, does he have any executive power to do anything on his own?
Isn't that what expires on the 15th is the emergency declaration?
It does expire.
I thought there was legislative action also that expired.
There were both of them. And I think they worked in partnership. The governor declared the emergency, and then the legislature amended the ordinance to allow teleconference meetings by teleconference. You'll notice that the basic requirement is the same. Meetings have to be cast in person, so that if your meeting failed, but you were able somehow to continue talking, the meeting wouldn't count because the public wouldn't get to see you cast your vote. So it's really critical that the basic tenet of that statute be complied with, and that's what's been allowed.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Any citizens to be heard? I've none signed up, but any other business? All right, hearing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.